money equals people are too busy and you won't have time to spend with those that you care about. And so I had, again, this negative image of money where it's like, great, I have this privilege. But as a child, that's not what you're looking at. You're looking at love and attention from your parents. And when they're out seeking money, but they're not present with you, to me, money was this distraction that was taking love and attention away from me and then leaving me feeling unlovable, unworthy, and even feelings of abandonment.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Stephanie Kwong, who shares how to change instantly. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. What if you could make massive changes to your life in an hour? Would you? Let go of childhood trauma or those beliefs that no longer serve you? I notice therapists spend a lifetime with you, and most people still have the problems because they keep revisiting and reliving them. I know there's a better way, and that's our topic today. Making a rapid change and getting it to stick. Stephanie is a highly trained subconscious coaching expert and is known as the secret weapon to the top 1% of high performers. With over 14 years of experience, she's helped individuals remove mental and emotional blocks quickly and sustainably, enabling them to achieve greater peace, joy, power, and freedom. Her mission is to provide rapid, effective tools for transformation through her method. Let's meet Stephanie and see how you can do this too. Welcome to Richer Soul, Stephanie Kwong. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Whew. So I'm Chinese, if you couldn't tell. And I would say school, there wasn't much learning, but I had a really complicated lessons about money through my family history. Both of my parents are immigrants. They came over when they were 17 years old. My father shared the story where he, as a firstborn son of 8 children, he was sent when he was 17 over to the United States with $300 in cash, $1,200 in traveler's checks, didn't speak the language, had no community or connections, and was told, figure it out and sponsor the entire family over from China to the United States. So it was a huge responsibility that was placed on him to need to figure out how to make his way. But he was really smart. He started working, as a busboy in a restaurant in San Francisco, Chinatown, and worked his way up as a server, was making good money. And then he ended up buying a house and then saw how much his real estate agent made and was like, wait, he didn't really do much and he made that much. You know how much I bust my tush as a waiter? I'm going to do that. So he learned how to he trained to be a real estate agent, and then he started his business. So when I came into the picture, my dad was on the uptrend and he became quite wealthy in the 70s, which was towards the end of it is when I was born. And money became not just a survival for him, it actually became power. And so I had a pretty privileged childhood, but yet money was the way that love was shown to us versus actual hugs and validation and presence. And so for me, what I learned as a kid was that money equals isolation. Money equals people are too busy and you won't have time to spend with those that you care about. Money equals, and there's other, things that I am going just to keep private because for the respect of my parents, that it actually became quite contentious in my home. And so I had, again, this negative image of money where it's like, great, I have this privilege. But as a child, that's not what you're looking at. You're looking at love and attention from your parents. And when they're out seeking money, but they're not present with you, to me, money was this distraction that was taking love and attention away from me and then leaving me feeling unlovable, unworthy, and even feelings of abandonment. Now, again, that's not what was happening, right? But as a kid, my logical brain, my analytical brain wasn't formed yet. And we always come back to ourselves of it means something about me. And so I created a lot of really negative interpretations of money based on witnessing it, my own personal experience because of it with my parents, that money was not necessarily something totally positive. However, I also saw the privilege that it did provide. And then when my parents divorced, my mom, she is absolutely incredible, but she was raising two kids in a wealthy neighborhood on $2,000 a month net. And so we went from having all this money to not. And then I really got to learn and experience what that felt like. So over the course of like my past history and what I learned was it was so conflicting. And so then it became about you need to earn and make money. So I started working when I was 15 years old, when I could get a worker's permit. And I started working to save up money, to put myself through college, and really because when my brother went, he hadn't done that. And so my mom was struggling to help him, get through college. So for me, it's like, let's prepare. And so when I became an adult, it was just so much confusing messaging that until I was having waves where I'd make a lot of money, and then I would lose it all. And then I'd make it up and I'd lose it all. It was a necessity for me to make the money, but because I had a negative relationship with money and what it does to destroy families, to pull time and attention away, then I would almost like release it because it wasn't safe to have it. And so that was my cycle personally with money based on what I learned as a child. Now, I was never sat down and taught like, here's how you, balance a checkbook, or here's how you earn, or here's how you save. That wasn't in my consciousness then. So I had to really sort all of that out on my own. But what I just shared with you was what I learned about money. And it was more on a mental, emotional side and a survival side than it actually was about practicality or to be able to grow it in my life.
You have a great grasp of understanding that story. Was that because later on you figured it out, or did you know it? I'm guessing you didn't know it as you were going through it.
Oh, no. This is all unconscious decisions, right? I made as a kid. And I'm literally going, I was able to share that because I've done the work to heal it, right? But those were my cycles. And I didn't know that I had villainized money, but I also needed it because when we didn't have it, I had to make it, right? But it was the cycles that I had with money that were so disempowering that eventually I'm like, I can't keep, I've never actually admitted this publicly before, but it was like, I'd make a lot, but I would go so deep that I would actually go into debt. And then I'd have to pull myself out of debt and go all the way up. Boom, I made a lot of money, but then I'd go back into, so these were like deep dip cycles. And I knew, especially when I'd go into those moments of debt, how stressful it was, how disempowering it was. And so for me, that's when I realized I'm like, something has to change. I don't know why, but I was already noticing a pattern. And because I started doing personal development work pretty early on, I didn't actually look at money until like my mid to late 20s. But so for a long time, I was having these dips. And then I finally realized I'm like, how do I stabilize this? How do I actually make money and keep it? And it stopped being such a stressful thing in my life. And that's when I dove in to do the work and started extracting and breaking everything apart. I even actually talked to both of my parents and asked them what their relationship to money is and what their perception of money is. And so, because it was so diverse and different, I was like, oh, I picked up a lot of that. And that's why it was so confusing for me. And I was having this very strange relationship to money, one that I didn't actually want. And in order to really recreate a better relationship with money, I had to understand my relationship with it and then start to heal what was blocking me from what I actually wanted in generating money and wealth. And then start to after I healed it, to really start to embody the type of person who has the money and wealth that I wanted.
You've articulated that extremely well. And the reason I say that is because sometimes we get guests who just have never even looked at their money story, right? And then we have people who like you have realized their money story. But the way you described it and articulated it well, it shows that you have a very deep understanding of what occurred and how to break through it and so forth. Was there an aha moment that kind of set you on that path to digging into your money story? Or was it part of some broader journey?
Yeah. This is going to sound crazy to say, and maybe people can relate or not. But Rocky, when I was in one of those down times, right, I would do things that were very much on the cheap. How do I save money? How do I cut corners? And I remember I was driving to a dinner, and instead of parking in valet, I lived in Los Angeles. It's expensive. I drove around for probably a solid 25 minutes to find street parking because that's cheaper, right? Here I'm wasting time. I'm wasting probably gas. But I finally parked my car at a meter, paid. Now I'm also walking a long distance to get to the restaurant, have the dinner. I come back and there's a ticket. And the ticket was more expensive than how much it would have cost if I would just have paid valet. And I remember the amount of turmoil I had with seeing that and going like, crap, I have to pay this. And then I started beating myself up for the decision I made. And and everything I shared, just like the wasting of the time. And I now have to pay more money. And I could have just blank, 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 like fill in the blank, right? But so much harsh self-criticism. And it was in that moment, I'm like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I can't. What am I doing? And I was so stressed out. And that's when I think I really started facing off with myself even more. And also, especially with my relationship to money, because it was creating so much turmoil in my life that I like hit that point where it's like, no more, right? Drawing that line in the sand where it's like something has got to change. And I think that was one of the moments when I had a really big realization that I got to fix this thing because I cannot keep going in these cycles anymore.
And it sounds like you did a wonderful job because the way you explain it shows that you have the understanding. And you can do it without emotion, right? In a sense, it's not triggering you or anything like that. No.
No. And that's actually usually when you know that it's been resolved, right? When there's emotional charge that's still there, that is showing that there's still healing to do, some more transformation to happen. And when it's a neutral event, right, or it becomes something that you can talk about, but there's no charge, that essentially really demonstrates that you've de-identified from that problem or that issue and that it no longer has control over you.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time. And it's funny because a few episodes ago, I asked this, wasn't exactly this, but during this conversation, they were talking about what a school teacher said to them, like somewhere right around the time of going to college. And she totally got triggered. And after we were done, I was like, that triggered you. She's like, yeah. She goes, I didn't realize how much I'm still holding on to that.
Well,
And you could see it. And I think that's the funny thing. A lot of times when we trigger ourselves, we don't even notice that, right? We go into it, or it might be a totally unrelated issue. So let's just say you never dealt with this, and here you are today, and you get a parking ticket. And you've got the money to pay it because you don't care. But all of a sudden, you've got this flood of emotion coming through, and you're like, why am I so upset at a little parking ticket? And yet, there it is.
mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Now, you're an expert in all of these areas. You've spent a ton of time in the personal development space and continue to work in that. Was there a spark besides money that sent you on that path?
Yeah. I mean, look, I am very, very fortunate for my mother. She went through quite a bit of trauma growing up. She was actually left in China when she was 5 years old to fend for herself. And then she got sent over when she was 17. And because of that trauma that she experienced, because of the massive breakdown in her marriage, and also she, asked for the divorce, and usually in Chinese culture, that is unheard of. So she got a lot of pushback from family. She had to do her own deep work. And fortunately, she decided to dive into it, because it's also very unusual for especially immigrant Asians to do any sort of personal development work. But something was pulling at my mom internally that drew her to figuring out how to heal herself. And so I actually grew up listening to Tony Robbins, his loud booming voice, in my living room, because my mom bought his tapes off of his infomercial, which is, as we know, that's how he started out. And she would play his tapes on a boombox in her house. And I was listening to Tony growing up. Now, of course, while I actually studied deeply with Tony later on in life, I didn't realize some of that was already being embedded into me. And there was already this exposure to this type of work that later on it felt natural to navigate into. But I got a model of someone who, is deeply struggling, but is diving in to do the work to create change in their life. And so I studied psychology at UC Berkeley. I've always had a deep love of humans and understanding how they work. And then after that, it really just spawned into diving deep into personal development work for myself. Now, money wasn't the first thing I worked on. So I'd already been doing work, but money became when I had my draw the line in the sand moment. I kind of knew already how to begin working through it, because I'd already started on the path earlier on based on, my own pains and struggles from what I experienced as a child.
It's funny. Every time I read a psychology book, I'm like, this is a parenting book, because it's all these childhood things that we have to come to grips with later in life. And a lot of times I think they're hidden. Like, you'll see the reaction, but you won't even realize that there was a root cause from long ago that you have long ago, I won't say forgotten, I'll say buried, because that's what I've noticed.
Well, here's the thing. It's not buried in your subconscious. Your subconscious knows, and it's what is the operating system. But your conscious mind, your level of awareness, it's buried from that, right? And most people have no idea. And all the paradigms, the worldviews, they think that that's real. And most of that, we were indoctrinated into it, whether it's from culture, from people that were our guardians growing up, or from people who were authority figures in our lives. But it's not always ours. And again, as I also shared, as kids, we're distorting reality and making meaning out of things that are actually very inaccurate from what's actually happening. But that's because our brains aren't formed. And I tell a lot of people, I was a master hypnotist, and I would bring people, when I would take them in and they would try to figure out what's root cause, I would do age regression. So I'd help them, encourage their subconscious mind to show the moments in time where they made these very critical decisions that have now become part of their operating system, right? Their blueprint. And many of them came from when you were a kid, because again, either it was embedded in from someone else, or it was a misinterpretation of our current reality, but that becomes our belief system. It's just like with my dad, he wasn't trying to abandon, ignore. He was off doing his successful thing that he was doing for himself. But how I interpret it is, ooh, see, look what money does. It's bad. It's wrong. It takes people that you love away from you. It's used for power. It's used for this and this. And that's not even true, but that's how my little kid brain was making sense of all of it. And all of this, from about birth until 8 years old, you're in basically a trance or hypnotic state. You're a sponge. You're just absorbing whatever people are telling you. All the misinterpretations also are getting locked in. And then you start really forming the analytical part of your brain, the conscious part of your brain, right? Logic, reasoning, analyzation skills, willpower, determination. And willpower is like the thing that doesn't work when you want it to. Why? Because it's your unconscious that's formed from birth to 8 and continues to record everything in your life that is actually running the show. And most people don't actually look back and go, wait, or if they're triggered, that to me is material to work on. Because when you have these big reactions to little things, you're like, what was that about? Well, it's usually probably not about the thing, but whatever was wired or programmed into you as a kid. And whatever, you get wired into or your belief systems, you start to create these same reaction cycles. And anything that's presented to you that is perceived similar to what you experienced in the past and the way you reacted then, boom, it just comes right back up and you just keep repeating the cycle. And that's why people get stuck in patterns, right? Even as adults, you're like, why do I keep doing that same thing over and over again? Or I know better to not do this, but something I just keep doing it. Well, it's not because you're consciously deciding if you want to do it or not. It's, are you wired for it? Is your blueprint or your operating system that you created as a kid, has it been updated? Or is it old software, right? And so that's why it's important, if you ever get triggered or ever have emotional reactions to things that you're really disempowering, to me, boom, that's a place to already go, let me start to pay attention. What is that about? And then that awareness alone is the entry point into being able to do that work, to heal it or to transform it or to transcend it.
The obstacle is always the way. It's funny because I grew up always, I don't know when, but I remember this Chinese proverb, and it was, show me the boy of 7 and I will show you the man. And it's the importance of that first part of life.
Yes.
In the programming that you were essentially putting into that child.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood it at some level when our kids were young. So we did a pretty good job. I didn't totally understand the depth of it. Now I've gotten much better at understanding those things. But we notice it, and our kids notice it too with us. Like, I'm like, yeah, I know you're going to blame me for all your things that you misinterpreted about what we did. I get it. It's all right. And we can chat about it. So what got you into the coaching space?
I actually fell into it, Rocky. I was working in the entertainment industry. I was in production and then raising money for independent feature films. And that was also a decision, I think, from my traumas of the past where I didn't feel seen or heard. And so I'm like, ooh, let me go into the entertainment industry. It's so sexy. People think it's cool. They look at you differently when you're in it. I have these celebrity friends. And so it was like ego, but also that little kid part of myself, just trying to be validated and being seen and to feel significant. But then as I was doing the work, I started realizing I picked this industry, this profession out of pain. And instead, now that I feel healed, what do I actually want to do? And so I knew that I wanted to do something in service. I actually got a bridge job running operations at a live-in weight loss facility. It was really high end, but I understood because I'd already been doing so much of my own work, why someone may struggle with their weight. Again, it's not the strategy, right? People know how to lose weight. They knew there was a deeper root that we had to excavate in order to pull it out so the person can actually lose weight and keep the weight off. So anyway, I'm working there and I'm helping people and I'm talking with them. And there was a young girl there from Italy who struggled with an eating disorder. And she came to me, asked me for support. to stay with her in her private apartment just so she wasn't alone. And so I would go and stay there. I was in a leadership training. I would go learn. I'd come, I'd teach her everything I was learning. And then the next thing you know, my landlord tells me I was living on Abbot Kinney in Venice and I loved my home. And he goes, hey, you got to move out because my girlfriend and I are moving in. And I was devastated. I tell this girl I was helping and she goes, well, then come to Italy to coach me. And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, if you have no home, come to Italy to coach me. I would love that. She'd already loved what she'd been learning from me. And so I gave my 2 weeks notice and packed up my house and I flew off to Italy to work with this young woman for 6 months, helped her, and came back to the United States and formally started getting trained in different modalities so that I could do it as a profession, like a true profession, helping people.
Nice. It's funny how life sometimes provides us opportunities. And I know I've been guilty of saying no.
Yeah.
You said yes. So congratulations on
I
that.
did. Thanks. It was one of the best decisions ever. I feel like I'm quite guided. And fortunately, at a very young age, I knew what was a yes and what was a no. And that's led me to, and trusting it has led me to some really extraordinary places.
So from all of that, you've co-founded your own method, the Rapid Rewire Method.
Mm-hmm.
What is it and how is it maybe different than other things that are out there currently?
Yeah. So I co-founded the company. These tools, I cannot take credit for them. They were created by a Yugoslavian psychotherapist and researcher for over 40 years, Zivrat Slavinsky. And what's different about it is the tools that we have are so simple to use, Rocky. They're literally in a standardized script that if you can read, if I handed you one right now and you read it and you just followed the steps, you could actually create quite a profound change for yourself or someone else, because you can use the tools for yourself or somebody else in a very short amount of time, usually under 60 minutes, and then notice an instant behavior change right after. And then it'll usually stick. To me, I find that very unusual because I'm trained in a lot of different modalities, NLP, somatic experiencing, breathwork, TRE, havening, hypnosis, strategic interventions, you name it. And I was actually known as a secret weapon to a lot of like the top 1%. I just got really highly trained, but also skilled in my work to create rapid and lasting change, and ended up getting connected to a woman who was one of the first 20 employees at Facebook and helped her quickly. And boom, she filled my entire calendar with her friends, which were some pretty high level people. And so I've always been in the state of like, hey, healing doesn't have to take a long time. You don't always have to slowly chip away at it or sit there and do a practice every single day for something to shift. I always felt that there had to be a faster way. And fortunately, through my training, I figured out how to do that. But these tools are actually even better than what I had before. Because my quick story with it was I actually got pregnant with my fiance, lost the baby at 9.5 weeks, was in such a dark place that all the tools I had were not working on me. An extraordinary community of coaches, therapists, healers, shamans that I had accumulated over 14 years of being a coach couldn't help me. And then I met my co-founder, Wesley, and literally in one session, one trauma release process, he fully processed the trauma of the miscarriage to the point where at the end of it, which was about 30 something minutes, I couldn't even feel sadness or grief in my body anymore. It was literally gone. It's never come back. And just like I told the story about money before, I could talk about the miscarriage and there was no charge. Like I was free. It was neutral, right? I filed it where it belonged in the past. It was no longer affecting me in the present or would go into my future because I fully cleaned it up. And that's what these tools do. We've been able to dissolve and integrate any limiting beliefs, any problems, any inner barriers to goals, any negative past experiences, any negative emotional looping that people get stuck in. Like if people get stuck in anger or, feeling insecure or inadequate or worry or anxiousness or overwhelm, we can literally resolve that and even trauma in 60 minutes or less, and usually with lasting change. So that's what makes our tools so unique. It's systematized. There's a proven framework. It's fast and it lasts.
Now, you said you could read it. So do they need to work with a person, or it's a program that they can do on their own?
Yeah, it's a program they can do on their own. So we actually, instead of us doing the work on you, facilitating, right? Because then I feel like it's still the powers in the practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
We actually train people on how to use these tools. So that's what the Rapid Rewire Method does. We are actually a training company where we teach people how to use these tools on themselves or someone else, which is to me true empowerment, because instead of fishing for people, right, we're teaching them how to fish so they can do it on their own anytime, anywhere with anything that they're struggling with. And then be empowered where if they are encountering a neighbor, a friend, a stranger who's panicking on the plane, or if you happen to be a coach or therapist or practitioner, you can infuse those into your business. Or if you're just someone who's like, I just want to learn them and not really use them as a profession, you're still fully capable of helping someone else and doing it in a way that is quick and sustainable and easy too, because you're following a script. You have a step-by-step pathway to help somebody.
Is there a time where it doesn't work? Or is there a type of person, maybe because of the way they're behaving, that it doesn't work?
Yes. So there are some people who are treatment resistant, right? It's not even just our tools. It's with any modality. There are some people who really want to cling on to the identity of being a victim, or they love clinging on to how big their problems I'm depressed. And that becomes their identity of who they are. And because there's secondary gain, right, for them to be in that way, it's harder for them to let it go, because they're like, gosh, I get attention, or I get to, avoid certain things in life, that it's hard for them to want to release that. And it gives them almost like that badge of honor, that significance of, look how big my problems are, that why would they want to let them go? Now, again, that's going to go across all modalities, not just our work, because there are some folks who will unconsciously sabotage as they're trying to, they have good intentions, but there's something within them that's driving even stronger, that's creating that saboteur to not let them actually be able to heal or transform.
And that makes sense. Some people don't want to be helped.
No,
as a matter of fact, I know this is going to sound bad. Most people don't want to be helped. I think they do underneath, but then, when they have to do the work, they don't want to do the work. So at the end of the day, they don't want to be helped, because if they did, they do the work.
Totally.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
Yeah, and then they have to want it for themselves, right? I actually worked inside of 2 addiction rehabs. And in there, a lot of the clients that I met with, they were forced into going into rehab. And then they would actually usually fall back into their addictions, right? But it was the ones that checked themselves in because they wanted it. They were the ones that were able to stay sober longer, or for, the rest of, or they just basically didn't, relapse. So it really has to be an internal drive to want it. But like you said, there are quite a few people who are like, oh, I just don't want to, or it's too hard, or it's scary for them, right? It's very courageous work to really look internally and heal those parts, or clean up those parts, or admit. Like, that's why when you asked me, what was that turning point? And I shared that part about I've never shared that. I was like, oh God, like it was to admit that. And then now I'm like, well, I just did it publicly. I mean, I'm fine because it doesn't mean anything, but it's things that, I felt very shameful of. And to actually admit it that was the hardest part. And I think a lot of people don't want to admit things that maybe they've done wrong in the past or things that aren't really working in their life, or to, like I said, just to face off with themselves and be really radically honest, because they might see things that they don't really like about themselves or wish that they hadn't done. And so the easiest thing is just to avoid.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It does. And I was thinking, like, does it really take courage to look at yourself in the mirror? Because to me, that, I don't know. I guess it's because I'm where I'm at now. Maybe 30 years ago, it would have taken courage. And maybe today, it just doesn't feel like it needs to be courage.
Yeah. But I think that's because you're on the other side, Rocky, and maybe you're further removed from that starting line. For some people, it's really hard. And then also based on your culture, right? You don't see a lot of Asian people doing deep work, but we have a lot of cultural trauma and a lot of very disempowering belief systems and viewpoints that really get in the way of us actually experiencing joy, fulfillment, inner peace. Like even one of them is like perfectionism, right? As we're growing up, well, our parents have the best of intentions to have us achieve, to succeed. And then if you make money, then it equals success. That means equals happiness. But then how they go about doing it is being so harsh and critical to push you to be the best that, again, as a kid, you're like, oh, I'm not good enough. There must be something wrong with me. I have to keep striving and achieve in order to be worth anything and be valuable. So I'm going to keep going. And then I burn out. Like there's so many, just from my own culture that creates so much disempowerment that really blocks you from, I think, what we're really trying to achieve, which is that peace, that joy, that fulfillment, that love. But that becomes a barrier to it. And if you don't look at it, it's going to keep running the show. And we were so emotionally stunted. It's like you can show strength and you can show happiness. Anything else, don't show it. So I was so emotionally illiterate and emotionally stunted. And then it started coming out in the weirdest ways because I was supposed to suppress it. But sometimes they'd boil up and poof, then I would explode. And I feel bad about that. And I was like, gosh, all these crazy cycles and things that I would do that would actually be hurtful to myself and others, that if I didn't take a look at it, it would be a problem. But for some, it's too painful to look at that and admit that, those things are what we've done or that's who we've been. So I think it is courageous to take a look at yourself and go, whoa, there's a lot of crap back there that I got to clean up.
There is. I think we were kind of lucky in that we made fun of the stereotypes with the kids.
Mm.
And so we'd use them, but they knew that it was like that. I mean, yeah, and you probably heard them, it's like, you kids, you're Asian. You're not Bijan. That's just the way it is.
Oh my gosh.
And my
I've
kids
never heard of that, Rocky. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Or you know what? Because when they're in high school, you know what the AP test stands for, right?
Asian something.
Yeah, it's Asian people test because that's who takes them. So they get all the good grades. It's funny because all my kids' cousins and stuff all went to Kumon. They're like, why does everyone go to Kumon? I'm like, I have no idea, but they were going to get tutoring all the time to push the kids ahead and get great grades and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we understood it, but we made it fun and we didn't make it pressureful.
But see, that's what's great about, your kids are so fortunate to have you for that, where you can joke about it, but also encourage them. I don't think everybody is as fortunate to have a Rocky as their dad, or, I feel fortunate now to have the mom that I had, but there's so many people, like humans on the planet, who don't love themselves, who are unconscious. And so then they spew all their stuff onto their children, maybe some intentionally, some unintentionally, but it has an impact. And so that's why I feel like there's so many folks that feel quite wounded that are, traversing this planet, but then they don't know what to do with it. But they also didn't have guides like you who can say, hey, we'll encourage you. This is give you reasoning for why you're doing something instead of just yelling at you to do it or striking you in some way. It's very different. And again, I had two immigrant Asian parents. And I think I actually had it good compared to what they got, right, from their parents. And it's this generational thing that just keeps passing on. Now, fortunately, because I did the work, I'm not putting that onto my stepkids, and my brother doesn't put it onto his children. But that's because I think we both, knew we wanted a different way, and we both were courageous enough to do the work so that we didn't continue to pass this on to future generations.
Well, that's good of you. I totally get it. And yeah, you have to make an intentional choice. And it's funny because I don't think any of I don't know what the latest parenting books say, but I don't know that these are the types of topics that are talked about with kids at all, or with parents for that matter. A lot of times that's kind of a big part of what the ahas are. Like, these are all the things we should be teaching our kids. Like, this should be what the education is.
Yeah, not trigonometry or calculus.
Yeah, not those, but, they can get both done. I mean,
no, I know. I'm just...
One of the things you say, though, this program is psycho, emotional, and spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean by that?
So mental, emotional, we work on that level, right? And also somatically. But the spiritual piece, so there's a whole suite of tools that we teach inside of our training. And we actually have some tools that can take people straight up into the non-dual, like into that oneness consciousness, right? Without needing to drink ayahuasca, lick a frog, or smoke DMT, or any other thing substance that might get you there. So and for some people, when they have that experience of accessing non-duality, it really creates like a spiritual awakening for them to feel, what enlightenment is, what that nirvana state is. So that's why the spiritual piece is in there as well.
So this really comes down to the thing. You can't really understand or experience a state you've never really had or experienced in forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever you're normally feeling, like if low-level anxiety feels normal, if you always have low-level anxiety.
Which I've had. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that feels like the norm. And so you don't even realize that you're doing it or having it in that sense until you get out of it.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's good for some people to take time for themselves, get out of the rat race, stop being so distracted or having so much information assaulted at you. It's distraction. If you can spend some quiet time, start to look internally, start to put yourself into different environments and see how that feels for your nervous system, right? When you said like low level anxiety, I'm like, oh, I know what that's like. When I was in LA, even though I live by the beach, it was like, I thought I was so conscious. I'm like, I live by the ocean, which is super chill. I don't get caught up in the whole LA scene anymore. And I don't need to be a part of the rat race. I don't work till all hours of the night. I thought I was good. And then when I got to Colorado, which is where I live now, and during the pandemic, I met my now fiance, but he was living in a house at the top of a mountain. We had no neighbors except for wild animals. And it was so spacious. And it was actually dysregulating my nervous system because it was so calm and still and quiet and just like nature. And that's when I was like, why do I feel dysregulated in peace? Oh, because I was running on what was comfortable, which was this like low grade anxiety. And that was my comfort zone. And then you take me out of it. And then this feels weird, which actually you would think, would be nice. And I was like, okay, what's the gap? And then that's when I started to experience different like states of being. And then obviously states of consciousness is different, which can be found through other ways to meet it. But that's when you pull yourself out of your normal environment and notice and observe yourself, you'll start to see that maybe actually peace and calm is very, very uncomfortable for you. And yet we're always saying that we're striving to get there. So that was a big aha for me.
I kind of had the opposite. And the reason I know, I grew up in Jersey and then we moved out. And so we're not rural, but we're far less stressful. And every time I would go back, even just going to the grocery store would trigger anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize just being here even though nothing is happening, causes massive amounts of anxiety. It's no wonder everyone's screaming at everyone over there.
Oh, totally.
And it's funny because you could hear it in they would say all these underhanded comments, especially when we first moved out here. They're like, oh, this is like peaceful and this. And I'm like, well, you can move here. And they're like, no, we can't. They felt stuck and they just didn't, like, it couldn't even cross their mind that they could find a way not to live in the midst of all of that, the New York City and New York suburbs type of thing. And now I don't worry about it anymore. And that's their choice. Whatever.
I know. Well, look, it's wild because we're in the mountains. And when I go into Denver, I'm like, now I feel it versus LA I was good with. Now, because my nervous system is entrained to calm and peace, when I go into a city, it's actually quite anxious. It creates anxiety in my body. And I was like, whoa. So maybe that's similar to you. It's like when you now calibrated to the rural and the peace, when you go into something that's a lot more energy, you feel the contrast and you're like, that's strange. But yeah, and everybody finds what is most familiar and comfortable for them. And that's where they usually like to stay.
That makes sense. You've dealt with a lot of top people, celebrities, entrepreneurs, successful people. Are there certain themes that tend to run across all of these people? Because you would think if you have money and success, everything's perfect. And I know you've already kind of alluded that it isn't.
Mm-mm. What I have observed, funny enough, a lot of the deep medicine work that they get is self-love. That's number one. That's a through line that I could tell you that a lot of these high performers don't embody. They have created and gotten to a place of where they are from a lot of push and drive and strive and a lot of self-criticism that actually then they wonder, why am I here and I don't feel good or I'm not happy? Well, it's that inner voice that they haven't managed that's hypercritical that's actually pushed them to become as great as they are or to achieve what they have. And a lot of them, when I looked under the hood too, had experienced quite a bit of trauma themselves. So a lot of this striving and pushing to achieve or to be the best came from a wound that they experienced and a decision that they had made in their past of like as an example, because I know I'm speaking a little like generalities, but I had a client who built and sold his tech company for $90 million. And he goes, I sold it and I was happy for like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, now what?
Mm-hmm.
When we started to dive into his history, he actually was highly abused as a child to the point where he had to leave one of his parents to go to another. And he was not treated well there either. And he was bullied. And so it came out in a session where he was like, well, yeah, because I have to prove them wrong. And I was like, oh, interesting. So he built this company to prove people wrong based on the pain of his past, which is why there wasn't fulfillment inside of it, because it was in order to avoid pain, right? I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be criticized. I don't want to be beat up or abused. So I'm going to build something to show them. And that is actually quite a common theme with a lot of these high performing people. I had another client who was in his late 20s, multiple 7 figures, but he thought he was dumb. And he actually made that decision when he was 3, shockingly enough. We were doing that age regression in hypnosis, and a scene came up when he was 3 years old, and he was playing with toys in his closet. And his dad came in and said, play with it like this. He did it his own way, and his dad said no. And he said in that moment, he decided, I'm dumb. That wasn't even like a big T trauma. It wasn't like he got beat or whooped or, starved or something. It was just, again, as I talked about before, our little kid brain is distorting reality and makes up negative meanings about ourselves, but we don't know any different. But he carried that from 3 into his late 20s. I am stupid. And then when he realized that, he's like, I built this company to prove that I wasn't dumb. So these are like common themes that I keep hearing with them, and why they're missing out on the other aspects of wealth and success, right? Which is mental, emotional, spiritual, versus just creating something, having status, and making an insane amount of money. And even when they then begin to shift, they still want to make an impact, but now it's like the second mountain. It's like, now how do I actually help others? How do I do this from a place of fulfillment? How do I do this from a healed place versus a wounded place, which is where I created the first mountain or climbed the first mountain? And that's what I see as a big through line with a lot of these people. And so there's like a lot of deep work of healing those traumas of the past, and also taking on big doses of self-love and really understanding what that even means so that they can begin to embody that.
Our original tagline is, you got rich, now what? And the concept was, the money didn't make you happy, because it doesn't. Now what? And I think when I started back then, I didn't realize as much this emotional side and the trauma side and all of that. And that has definitely, over the years, kind of come much more so to the forefront across all of these conversations.
Yeah.
Little by little. So let's do real quick before we end up. What does like a session look like? When somebody works with this, like, what does it feel like, look like?
Yeah. I mean, so I don't really work with people as much anymore. If I do get a referral that's a very high profile person and it feels aligned, I will work with them. But it's really just a matter of like, hey, we isolate what is the specific problem you're dealing with right now. When you put your attention to the problem, what's the emotional charge that gets activated, right? Because what makes something a problem is the emotional attachment you have to it. That's why two people can look at the same thing and one person might see it as a problem and one doesn't. Simple, easy example, traffic. It's a neutral event. But man, does traffic piss people off sometimes? And then there's other folks that don't.
You mean it doesn't have to?
It doesn't have to, friends. And so, it really depends on your viewpoint of it and maybe your past relationship to it or what it means. And so that's why for some, we always talk about, we work a lot through the emotion, because when the emotion is either more empowering or neutral, then now it ceases to become an issue for you, right? Or you can de-identify from the thing that's actually keeping you feeling stuck or in cycles that you don't want. So we really distill out, what is the specific problem? What's the emotional charge that gets activated? And then we do some other info gathering, and then we dive into one of our tools that work through the mind, the emotions, and the body to be able to integrate it. So we're allowing all the material that's keeping that problem in place to arise depending on the protocol. So that's why it's difficult for me to tell you exactly how does it look, because we have a multitude of tools and it'll be a little bit different depending on the tool that you use. But ultimately, we're essentially distilling out what a problem is, the emotional charge. We start to do the cleanup, and by the end, they feel free. They're no longer held back by that particular issue anymore. So that's what a session would look like in about 60 minutes or less.
It's funny, when you were talking about traffic, I'm like, why do I get upset at traffic? Sometimes and not other times. And I realized it's not the traffic. It's what is the outcome of the traffic. So if the outcome of the traffic is I'm going to miss my flight, that's going to have a very different level, but it's not the traffic. It's the outcome it causes. Whereas at other times, if you're going somewhere you don't want to, and there's lots of traffic, you're like, guess we'll be late.
Yeah. But I think, but you just distilled out. What does that mean? What does traffic mean? Well, if traffic means that I'm going to be late and miss this, which now will cost me money, will cost me time if I miss my flight, will maybe cost me for the reason why I'm even traveling to begin with, then the meaning that traffic is it's bad. It should not be happening right now, right? But if you're like, ooh, this is actually preventing me from going and doing a thing I don't want to do. Now you're welcoming it, but you just placed a different meaning on traffic, right? So yes, it has to do with the outcomes, but in the moment, there's something that we're deciding about what it means to us that either creates emotional charge or not, right? And let you distill out that sometimes you're like, sometimes it pisses me off and sometimes it just doesn't.
Well, it's true,
Mhm.
it's kind of what it does. You mentioned talking about the release, and I've been told that, releasing it from your mind and turning down the noise level in your mind is relatively easy to do, but that the body heals at its own speed, and it's usually not that quick. So are you able to get the body to release it that quickly, or is it we start with the mind and then little by little the body releases it?
When you're talking about release of the body, are you saying it's releasing the trauma? Is it releasing physical pain? Is it releasing?
Trauma.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't have to take that long. If you have the right protocols that work with the mind, the emotions, and the body, it can shift out quickly. When you look at animals, what do they do when they come across a really highly traumatic experience?
They
I know you,
shake.
right. Does it take a long time? No, because they
No.
know how to do it. And there's a process for them innately that enables them to release it, right?
Toddlers do the same thing.
I know they do, right?
We stop
Yeah.
them.
No, I don't stop them. It's actually really funny. My niece one time, man, I was babysitting her. She was only like 2 years old, but she was throwing a tantrum. And all I said to her was like, hey, Kylie, when you do that, it hurts Auntie's ears. So I'm just going to close the door, okay? And I was like, or if you want, you can stop. And I actually gave her a choice, but she was like, ah, and she just kept going more. And I'm like, perfect. I love that she made that choice for herself to just let it rip. And I wasn't telling her to stop, but I did tell her because it was pretty jarring for me. And I didn't want her to think I just shut it on her. So that's why I informed her of what I was doing. But yeah, I think it's so good. They do naturally do it. And that's why you watch kids just move through emotions so fluidly. They can be bawling their eyes out, then laughing, then crying, then angry again, then laughing again. But it is the adults that have a hard time with these emotions because they can't be with emotions or their own. That's why we shut it down in others. And that's why I think it's a powerful thing for us as adults to really be able to hold our own emotions, to be able to express them so that we can be with others and their emotions as well.
And I guess what I'm now thinking is, if you've held it in your body for 30 years, will it release that quickly? Or because you've held it so long, will it take longer? Which is a little bit more
Yeah.
subtle of a question.
Rocky, that's a really good question. I have not actually tested it, so I can't say from experience.
Okay.
Like this is how fast it is. And I would also say that it's probably dependent on the person
Mhm.
and how deeply embedded it is, or how willing their body is to let go of it, or if there's, some sort of gain to also cling on to it as well. So there's so many factors that are involved that I don't think it's that clear cut to say, yes, it's going to be fast. It might be for some people, or maybe for some others, it could take a little bit longer. So it really depends. But I have seen where people, when they do have a protocol that works integratively with in every single way that a memory or an experience is stored, that it actually can be released quite quickly. I mean, even sometimes when we run group processes, I did one recently at a cancer support group. And this woman came up to me and she goes, I've had this weird pain in my back. And I don't know what you did in the process, but I actually don't feel it anymore. Now, that's a physical indicator of pain versus saying and I would say that's still trauma, right? That's an expression of it. Maybe there's parts that people don't actually feel that still lodged in their body. But I was like, that's great. I'm glad you feel better. And then she felt better about her problem too. But now she also got that release in her back that she'd been experiencing pain. And what's fascinating to me, there's that beautiful book, I Think You Can Heal Your Body by Louise Hay, where she talks about the association of emotions to the physical expressions of these disempowered emotions. And when the woman actually told me that her back pain was released, I said, do you feel unsupported in your life? And she goes, that's the very thing I worked on in the process. And in her book, Louise's book, she talks about the correlation of when you have lower back pain, many times that's an indicator that you don't feel supported because there's these beliefs and emotions that get expressed through the body. And when you heal it, mine, when I worked with her mentally, emotionally, it also physically released in her back as well. So there definitely is a correlation, and it happened pretty quickly for her.
And there is a book on that, Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. And in that book, they literally talk about the pain is psychological. And when you deal with that, the pain disappears. He goes, and he just talked about how certain types of things tend to go through cycles. Like for a long time, everyone used to have ulcers. And now, then they had back pain. And then next they'll have this. And it becomes almost societal how these things kind of flow and
manifest in the body. Yeah.
And manifest in the body. Yeah. And it all goes back to what you've been talking about the whole time.
Yeah.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Whew. To feel it.
Interesting. I don't think anyone said that, but that's true. Right? That when you say feel it, it's almost you have to be in the moment in order to do that.
You got to be present, and you got to just allow yourself to feel abundance. Right? To me, it's not necessarily an external thing. It's an internal thing. And that's how, when I feel abundant, I am abundant.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the cool thing is, then the world around me starts to reflect that too. And I can tell you, I have an abundance of a lot of things in my life, but it's because I just really allow myself to feel safe, to feel true abundance.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That I am safe.
And I think most people are, most people in the United States are safe unless they're in an abusive type of situation, I think. But we don't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Love yourself in your full spectrum of who you are. I'm telling you, Rocky, that was when I worked with a lot of those high profile people, it was this inability to love who they are and all of who they are, right? Even as we make mistakes, it's still part of who you are. And back in 2014, I actually created a self-love course, and I distilled out 8 pillars of self-love. And it was self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-trust, self-permission, self-respect. I'm like trying to look at the pillars. Receiving and self-appreciation. And if I ask people, how good are you on all these? Most people are barely practiced in that. They're actually doing the very opposite. They're hypercritical. They don't trust themselves. They don't forgive themselves. If you ask them, say 10 things you love about yourself, they get super uncomfortable because they can't appreciate and parts of themselves or even who they are. They have a hard time receiving, etc. All those that I mentioned, they're actually the polar opposite of it. And if you truly want to live a deeply loving and fulfilling life, it starts with you. So to every human, whether you're 18 or not, love yourself and consider those pillars of like, how far along am I in those to really be embodying what self-love means. Yeah.
That is wonderful advice. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
If people would like to find the Rapid Rewire program and learn more about you, how can they do that?
You can just head on over to rapidrewiremethod.com. We actually have a freebie on our website. So if you go to like the homepage and the middle of the homepage, you can download one of our tools and try it for yourself and have a direct experience. So now instead of you saying, what does a session look like? Be like, Rocky, you tell me, how does that feel? Now it's a recording, but because our tools are so standardized, you'll definitely be able to experience a shift through going through it. But you can go there, and then that's probably the main place to find us.
Cool. Yeah. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rocky. It was super fun to connect with you.
After hearing Stephanie and all the examples of beliefs that she grew up with, did you notice some of your own? Do you notice yourself getting angry for no good reason or an oversized reaction to small things? It's normal. We all do it, even me. Are you aware of low-level anxiety and how your environment affects you? You know, the funny thing is, when you live with that, you don't even notice it because it's your normal. That's what I found out. And when you change it, you're like, wow, I didn't realize I was living with all of that. Like I said, I keep working on this. Hopefully, there is a much faster way to do this, and I plan to check out her work too, because there's no reason to go slow. By the way, who do you know who might benefit from this episode? Would you do me a favor and share it with them so they can get that rapid rewiring too? Next week, we've got the power of gratitude with Don Williams. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.